Hello, this is Susan Case, and I am delighted to welcome everyone to this uh, library lecture tonight. We are just so grateful that we have a wonderful speaker to join us, and that speaker is Frank Zaremba. Frank is a Master New England Camera Council and a renowned photographer as well as educator. Frank has been instrumental in our club in educating us on so many aspects of photography, and we're just thrilled that Frank could join us tonight. Frank is replacing Nick Stover, who was unable to present. And we are just, as I said, so very grateful that Frank is able to bring to us a wonderful presentation on flash photography. And with that, Frank, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Sue. Oh, now I see everybody has the problem. As soon as you do that, it clicks in front of your screen. Okay, can everybody see the screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. Yes.
So tonight's presentation, we're going to talk about flash photography or the other light. So as with anything, please read and understand the operating manual and all other safety instructions before you use your flash. Tip number one, do not blast it directly into your face. So with that, you now have everything you need to know about flash photography. So photography is the art of creating images by drawing with light. And since coquinus is on, it comes from the Greek words pho, meaning light, and graphe, meaning drawing. The alternate definition of photography is the art of always wanting to buy more camera, lens, props, and editing tools. So a camera creates an image by capturing reflected light. So in other words, no light, no image. Unfortunately, the sun is a constant light, it's reflected light. Flash is not. Flash is classified as incident lighting, which means that it only comes on when the unit is triggered and it provides a one shot of light that your camera records. I think that where a lot of people get into it and not setting up their camera correctly, and when the flash comes on, their settings are way off. So we'll try and cover that on what you can go through and do to correct it. So I just want to get into a little bit of history on flash. And again, flash is a device used to produce a burst of light. So it started out as by Robert Bunsen, the same gentleman that brought to you the world famous Bunsen burner. And he discovered that magnesium powder would burn. So you would actually carry that with you, put it in a tray, ignite it, and it would actually ignite, and then the shutter would open up and you'd capture a picture. So shortly after that, we went to flash bulbs. Same kind of thought is that flash bulbs contained a magnesium filament along with oxygen, so that when that was fired, it would actually fire prior to the shutter opening up because it needed the time to go through and reach its full power so that you could go through and take a picture. The original flash bulbs were made out of glass. Unfortunately, when they got ejected, they were too hot to handle, and the majority of them would fall on the floor. You had broken glass all over the floor. So that's why they went through and changed it out to plastic. The next flash that came along was the flash cube, and we went back to igniting flash powder. So when the flash cube was designed, the original intention was it for to be fired off the battery that was in the camera. And the majority of the batteries were there just to kind of do metering. So they usually failed. And so the magic cube that Sylvania came up with actually had a primer on it, and it contained shredded zirconium foil in the flash. And the same thing, the flash would go off, the shutter would open, you took your picture. That kind of leads us at where we're at today. So back in 31, Harold Edgerton, known as Papa Flash, came out with the electronic flash. The biggest problem that it had is that it was a very large and expensive, and you had to carry around a very heavy lead acid battery in a shoulder strap that you would carry around with you. And so it was a very heavy undertaking to carry around. And today's flash, um, they actually charge up a capacitor that's high voltage. And when it discharges, that's what's sent towards the ignite or the glass element that will go through and power up your flash. So I want to go through and put flashes that you can buy today fall into two versions. One that's made specifically for your camera, or one that's made generic to all cameras. So you can actually get a flash that will work on any camera, or you can get a specific flash for your camera. And basically, the way that you can tell is that if you look at the bottom of the flash, a generic flash will just have a single contact. So it actually gets a contact closure from the camera that goes to the pin in the center and the pins along the edge, and it'll fire. If it's camera specific, you'll go through and see that there's multiple contact. And that's there so that the camera and the flash can actually talk with each other. So the way that you find out which one you need is you look at the top of your flash. And the one extra, the hole that's there that's the locking pin. So when you're actually putting the flash on the camera and you lock it in place by either screwing it down or moving the knob, what it's doing is it's dropping a pin into that hole so that your flash does not accidentally fall out. And I was going to say, if I'm saying something, you have a question, and you come up with something about the flash, just stop and interrupt me as I'm going. So if you don't own a flash, things to go through and look for. So kind of the key thing is that number one, it works with your camera. Also that it has TTL, through the lens mode. And when we're talking about through the lens with a flash, what that means is that the flash will actually fire a short discharge of light, go and meter it, adjust it for with your camera settings, the way the flash is set up, and it adjusts how much flash is required to take the shot, and then it triggers once the shutter opens. That it has a manual mode so that you can go through and set it up. Today, a lot of flashes will give you full power, or they will give you one 256 power. And I think that even today, there's probably a few that will give you one 512 power. I'm not sure what you'd need that little bit of light for, but keep in mind that that's there. You want to make sure that it has a bounce or swivel head. The other thing to look for is that it has a zoom head. So what that means is as you're shooting with a zoom lens, as you're zooming in or out with the lens, the flash head is moving within the flash so that it goes through and sends out the amount of light for the coverage that you need for that distance. And you'll actually hear, again, if you got it for your camera, you'll actually hear the flash powering the head back and forth to go through and do it. The other thing to look for is a bounce card, wide angle diffuser. I'll get into on the next slide. Guide numbers. You want to get a flash that has the highest guide number, but you need to understand what the guide number means because manufacturers have changed the way that guide numbers are printed on the box. It was always that they were set up as feet. Some of them are printing as meters. It was always ISO 100. Some of them say it's ISO 400. So you can actually look at it and see that there's a large GN number. But if it's talking about feet instead of meters and ISO 400 instead of 100, that large number really doesn't mean a whole lot. You want to make sure that it has high sync capabilities, and we'll get into high sync. Want to make sure that it can be used off camera. So you need to go through and find out the flash that you're using, that you can either get some type of an adapter, some type of controller that you can put on your camera, put the flash wherever you want it, and it will control it. And off-camera flash can still be set up for TTL. It all depends upon what the controller will go through and transmit to that unit. You want to make sure that it accepts diffusers, um, flash gels, rear display. And then the other thing to take into consideration are the type of batteries and what's the recycle time. So some of the flashes today have proprietary batteries, and you're buying that battery, or some of the flashes work off of AA rechargeables, and there's a huge difference in cost to go through and do it. There's also a huge difference in capacity and weight. And then the last thing I think you need to just put in the option is the cost, and what your pocket will go through and afford as you're doing and getting your flash. So when we talked about a bounce card is nothing more than a little white piece of plastic that comes up off the flash head. And the wide angle diffuser is something that pulls out, goes in front of your flash, and it actually goes through and sends out the light a little bit further as far as the width for your unit. So camera brands and flashes, most camera brands will make a flash unit specifically for their camera. There are third-party camera manufacturers that will make camera specific flashes, and then there are just generic flashes. So Bolt, Newer, Godex, Westcott, Yongano, they'll all make a generic flash that if you change camera brands, they will still work. Again, things, flashes that are very camera specific will have more features and functionality than generic flashes to go through and use, because you're basically, if it's a generic flash, you're always using the flash in manual. There's no communication between your camera and the flash unit itself.
Frank, quick
Yes.
question. Um, with regard to the difference between camera specific and generic, or even third party camera specific, is the difference really recognizable? Have you seen,
Oh, so only in price.
but what
And
about functionality?
no, there's no difference.
Ah, thank you.
So, and thank you for the lead in. So this is my flash kit, part of it. So I use Godox. I use the TT685-2, and the O that you see there says it's for Olympus. And I have two of them. They go for 129, unless you find them on sale. Then they go just above $100. Um, they're just as powerful. It has a zoom head. Um, it goes through, and I use a XT2 controller. So that controller goes on my camera, and I can put the flashes wherever I want. And just recently, I got rid of my Nikon flashes, and for the cost of one of the Nikon flashes, I bought two Godox and one controller to go through and use, and I have not found any difference in going through and using them at all.
One more
Uh,
question, Frank.
sure.
I'm looking at this and I see the image. It says uses 4 AA batteries and
Yes.
129. And then could you just walk through what exactly we're looking at?
Not sure, but anyway, so the device on the end is the actual flash. And again, my flash of choice from Godox is the 685-2,
Gotcha. Thank you.
right? The big difference between the 685 and the 685-2 is the locking mechanism on the bottom. So if you see that little gray tab to go through and lock the flash on your camera, you move it from left to right. You don't actually go through and screw it down. And again, if I'm using it as a remote, I put the XT2 controller that says it's $59 on my camera, and I can handhold, put the flash anywhere else that I want to use it, and it will control it. And it even allows me to take, well, the fact I only have two flashes, it allows me to take the two flashes, put them in two separate groups, and go through and set them up for two different power. So I can go through and set it up. And even though I have that controller, Godox does have an app, and the app is very simple to use. Um, it works as well as the little controller. It's just a little bit quicker. Um, since shooting with Olympus, there is no pop-up flash, just like a lot of newer cameras do not have a pop-up flash. So what came with the camera is that small little Olympus flash, and it is actually powered by the camera. So it's a bounce head, and it works very well for flash. I do own a ring flash. As you can see in the bottom of the unit itself, that's what I was talking about, where that screws down in order to go through and hold it in. I use a Gary Fong light sphere for diffusion. And the little unit that's down at the bottom that says Velo. So in the event that you have some expensive flashes and you change camera brand, you can actually use that controller to go between the camera and the flash, and it basically changes your flash to a generic flash. So as you can see from the top, it only has a center pin. So if you want, if I want to go through and use my Nikon flash on my Olympus, I actually put it into that unit, and it would just convert the Nikon flash into a generic flash. Any other questions on this page? Cool. My other flash kit. So I have a Sectronic flash meter that I use all the time. I have a plethora of strobes. Uh, I use Interfit honey badgers. I have both powered and battery. This is also what we use for the family photo shoot. Um, And then this is what the Godox Flash app looks like. So you can go through and set up group A, group B. You can set the different power levels strictly by touching them and going through and using your finger as a slider, and it works extremely well and efficient.
Frank, another question.
Sure.
Codex Flash app, Group A is one group of one flash and B is another flash.
Yes. Or
Okay,
for the
thank you.
sake of argument, if you had 10 flashes, you could put five in A, five in B, any combination that you want. When I get to show you the display of the Godox Flash, we'll kind of get into that. And you actually just set it up, and once you tell it that it's uh, group A on a specific channel, and one of the first things that you do is that just because of Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and everything else, out of the 30 some odd channels that it can use, it will actually go through and search all the channels and say, these are the channels that I like the best. And then you can just go through and set it up. And once you do that, they work extremely well.
Thank you.
Okay, so why use Flash, right? So when you want to go through and control or modify the light, sometimes you're shooting and the sun may be out, the sun may be down. So you want to go through and use something that you can control or modify, um, have it set up so that you're getting a specific direction from the light. It also is a way that you can control the quality of the light, and it also gives you a way that you can add color to the light. So if you're using your flash, you can always put a gel in front of it and get any color. And if you're shooting with multiple gels, you can put in multiple colors and have one side of a person red and the other side the person blue, and change it around as you see fit. So that's kind of the key reason for using flash. Okay. So again, it improves the color of your images. It'll either improve or add contrast to your images, and it improves sharpness in your images because you're able to shoot at a higher shutter speed than if you were shooting without the flash. It's also going to go through and give you a way that and you say, well, I can go through and raise my ISO. And this means that you don't have to go through and do that. So ways to use it, you can use your flash as a bounce um, to go through. One of the things that you need to be aware of, if you're bouncing your flash off of something, if you decide to bounce your flash off of a red wall or a blue wall, um, that's the color that you're going to be projecting. So you need to make sure that if you are bouncing, you need to make sure it's a neutral um, or very light. And then you're not going to really bounce something if you're in a ballroom and the ceiling is 30 to 40 feet above you, because by the time it gets up there and back down, it's not going to go through and happen. One of the things that you need to be very much aware of is direct flash. That's very harsh. Sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. Usually what will happen is that if you're shooting with direct flash, your images of the people that you're shooting look like they're deer in the headlights just because of the amount of flash that's coming out. And again, what helps with all of that is using diffusers or modifiers so that you can go through and change your subjects, the lighting that goes on them. And then using your flash off camera, you can also add shadow into your subjects that you're shooting. So setting white balance on your flash. So if you look at your color temperature both midday or daylight on your camera says it's 5500 Kelvin, and Studio Flash also says that it's 5500 Kelvin. So the question is, are they the same? And the answer is no. If you go through and set up your camera for daylight, it actually puts in some magenta on it for skin tones. And if you're shooting flash, it does not go through and add that in. So is there a better one to use? The answer is yeah, auto works just fine. So again, auto white balance, not auto ISO. So this is one of the pictures from the family photo shoot. And this is the first picture that every photographer takes. And they take it for three reasons. The first reason, it tells them the name of the family they're shooting. And if they can't read their sheet, it tells them what number they are. And it also gives them a black point, a white point, and a gray point that they can go through and use for adjusting their flash and matching their color. So even though this year we got a very gray neutral background, that is a pure black point, a pure white point, and a 50% gray that they can just go through and click on. So having a color checker for flash, something that I use, this actually works out extremely well. And we've always asked people not to put their fingers on the colors. And I do change those out every few years. Okay, so we're getting to setting up your flash. So this is the most important flash picture that you can take. Any guesses why?
Ambient lighting.
Ambient lighting. You want to make sure that there's no ambient light. And the reason for that is that if you're taking a flash, you don't want green fluorescence, anything else to impact your picture. You want the only light that's exposing your image to go through and come out of your flash, not from anywhere else. Having said that, if you're using flash outside during the day, you kind of want to match the two of them up. But if you're shooting indoors, you're going through and setting up for portraits, the first image that you want to see is a pure black image because you don't want any ambient light to go through and impact your scene. So to go through and define ambient light. So ambient light is the light that's already in the scene. Sun, man-made sources. And again, even though it says a popular technique is to go through and use the flash as an additional light for your subject and use ambient light to illuminate the background. I'm sure that everybody's seen sunset pictures, and it's a lovely sunset in the background, and the couple is well lit. The only light that's out there is the ambient light from the sunset, and it's at their back. They are not going to ever get illuminated. So the way that you want to go through and use the flash at that point is to illuminate your subject and continue to allow light in so that you're capturing that sunset. And again, the way that you set that up is you expose for ambient light first, and then you go through and match in your flash to go through and meld the two together. Okay. So we're gonna go through and get into it because there's three parts to flash photography: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. And the shutter speed is the only thing that controls ambient light, because you can use your flash at slow shutter speed to capture that ambient light. The duration of the flash that you're using isn't going to change. The duration of the shutter that's letting in ambient light will continue to record even after your flash is fired. So again, heard this, not a big fan of the statement, but flash photography requires that you take one picture with two different exposures, and the two different exposures being the exposure to capture correctly the background lighting and your subject lighting. So you're only going to fire once. It's going to be one set, but you're matching the two so that it captures both light. So if you've ever seen the exposure triangle, there's also the equivalent flash power triangle. And you'll see the one thing that's missing off the flash power triangle is shutter speed, because shutter speed does not impact your flash power. Flash power is set up strictly by aperture and ISO. Ambient light is really dictated by shutter speed. So if you get nothing else from this presentation, shutter speed controls ambient light, aperture controls, and the flash power, how much light you let in from your flash. So again, aperture, and only the aperture controls the amount of electronic light that exposes it, and shutter speed controls the amount of time that any ambient light is allowed to expose the picture. So the two images that are here were shot during the day, and I'm going to say either 1 or 2 in the afternoon, at White Flower Farm, and they were shot with off-camera flash set at 1/64th power, and the flash was set up about a foot from the subject, and no black background card was used. So as you can see from the histogram that's there, they were shot at ISO 200, 40 millimeters. They were shot at f14 at 1/250th of a second. And 1/250th of a second happens to be the native flash sync speed of my camera. So the light was shot from above, pointing down, and that exposure would have given me a black picture, even though it was outside on a sunny day.
That's amazing.
And it's, I don't want to say, truly, it is simple to go through and do just by going through and doing it. If you take the picture and it's too dark, increase your flash power. Again, this was at 1/64th power. It was shot a foot away. If you blasted your face, you would think there's no way in the world you're going to correctly expose the image. But at f14 at 250th of a second, it needs a lot of light. And that's what the flash provided. And if you want to look at it, it actually overpowered the existing light that's out there, where it didn't have any impact on this. Had I shot at a slower shutter speed, the background would have appeared because after the flash fired, the camera would have stayed open and it would have been recording ambient light that was available. So again, you could have matched this so that you got a darker background of the subjects to give it a little, I want to say depth, but give it a sense of place that you can see, or you can set it up so that you can power the flash and the only light that gets recorded is that short burst of light that comes through. And again, the one thing I haven't covered yet, but the lower the power settings, the faster the flash. So if you're shooting at like 128th power, the flash is only going to fire for about 1/20,000th of a second. And I think that's the next slide. No. So again, when you're shooting flash, ISO controls light globally, shutter speed controls ambient light, and aperture controls flash power. So as you're watching these shutters open, I mentioned that my camera sync speed is 1/250th. So if you look at the 1/200th of a second, there is a period of time where the entire sensor is being exposed. That's when the flash fired. When you're looking at the 1/500th and the 1/1000th of a second, there is no time that the entire sensor is exposed. So when you go through and you use too fast of a shutter speed, you get a picture that looks like this. And the reason being is that that's the time that your shutter was open to the flash firing, and your flash is done firing, and then your shutter moves down to the next section and it's just capturing ambient light. So if you've ever captured a photo like this, the reason is that you're shooting at too high of a shutter sync to go through and properly light that fast of an exposure.
Frank,
Yes.
question. How do you know what the shutter sync is for your camera?
You mean, did you want me to say like it's in your manual?
Oh, okay. Thank you.
But I'm going to cover that in a sec. But
Okay.
yes. So, and again, there's not just one sync speed for your camera, believe it or not. So again, too fast of a shutter speed. And so these are the flash output settings, right? So if I wanted to shoot, for the sake of argument, at about 1/2000th of a second, that means the flash is only going to fire 1/4 power, right? Because that's its duration, but it's only going to do that for 1/2000th of a second. And for 1/2000th of a second to occur on your camera, it's going to go through and either move the shutters that it's going to go and open up very thin slices, or it's going to paint your mirrorless camera top to bottom, and you're still only going to get that light. That's where high speed sync comes in. And what happens with high speed sync is that your flash actually flashes and will fire multiple times so that it will properly light the entire frame that you're taking. So instead of getting that sliver of light, it will continue to fire, but it fires at a much lower power than anything else. Excuse me. And again, so when I talked about flash duration, so if you go through and look at these examples, so the power from the speed light is going to be this short duration of power. If I fire at a 30th of a second, the flash fires when the shutter opens, and the rest of the time it's collecting ambient light. If I fired at a 60th of a second, the same thing happens. All the way down to 1/250th of a second. So that's why shutter speed doesn't impact your flash. It impacts the amount of ambient light that's coming in.
Frank, wouldn't that slower shutter speed also increase the amount of ambient light along with the
Yes.
aperture?
I'm sorry, that's what I meant.
Okay.
If I didn't, so yeah, 30th of a second, the flash is going to fire for 1/10,000th of a second, for the sake of argument. The rest of that time, it's going to just be capturing ambient light coming in. And again, if you were taking that sunset photo, the people, and it said, gee, I need 1/4 of a second, you set your camera up for 1/4 of a second, still fire the flash. It fires that one time, freezes the people, but sits there and continues to capture ambient light so that you get properly exposed people and a properly exposed sunset. So to answer Sue's question, and since Gene and I have basically the same camera, so if I'm using mechanical shutter, my camera has 1/250th of a second. And if I'm using electronic shutter, it has 1/100th of a second. And if you're using a camera like a Hasselblad or a Mamiya that has leaf shutters in the lens, sync speed's irrelevant. Because when that shutter opens and the flash fires, it illuminates the whole sensor at one time. So if this is all a problem to you and you got 20 to 30 grand, go for it. So believe it or not, in your camera, on one of your menus, it will show you your shutter, your fastest shutter. And if you look at this is out of a Nikon. And you can see that it's at the top. So the fastest that you can shoot is 1/320th of a second. And that's based on the focal plane staying open for that amount of time. Its native shutter speed is 1/250th, but they found that you can push it to 1/320th with the Nikon flash, and it will work fine. Oh, I should have probably put that slide there. Let me go into this. So the other thing that you can have on your flash is whether the flash fires at the beginning of the exposure or at the end of the exposure. And I'll get into why you would want to do that in a minute. So using TTL with front curtain, there's a pre-flash that goes off. It meters the scene. The shutter opens. The flash fires. And then it continues to gather ambient light until it closes. If you're using rear curtain sync, does the same thing. Pre-flash fires, goes through and it meters all the way through, and then just before the shutter closes, it fires the flash. And it basically has to do with light trails. So between front curtain and rear curtain, which of these two images looks natural, right? So you'd actually have the ball moving from the cue and then capture the ball, not the other way around. And it's the same thing with light trails. If you're going through and shooting light trails, you don't want to capture, or you may want to capture the car first and then have the lights go through the car. You may want to capture the lights and then capture the car without the lights going through the car. So that's kind of the primary reason for using rear curtain sync. And again, how do you set it up? It's a menu setting in your camera, as are all of these. So automatic TTL, red eye reduction, fill flash, slow sync, rear curtain. You can also set up flash exposure or manual. These are all settings that are on your flash and also in your camera. So again, so looking, I think the top one is Nikon, the bottom one is Canon. And they do have built-in flash for that little pop-up. If it's not there, you can still go through and do rear, slow, and those are all settings that are in the camera to go through and set up. And so on Nikon, you can set them up as TTL or manual. On the Canons, it's eTTL to go through and set up. And then if you're using Olympus, like a few of us, when you go into the master control panel and you see the little flash, as I found out with some of the newer cameras and most of the mirrorless cameras that do not have a pop-up flash, you can actually turn your flash off, either accidentally or on purpose. And no matter what you do, putting a flash on, putting the manufacturer's flash on, trying to fire a strobe, it will not fire, because it's going through and setting it up to say, no matter what I do, I don't want the flash to fire. And on this one, it also allows for slow. And then on a different menu setting for flash, you can go into red eye reduction, and the sync settings are for either first curtain or second curtain. So it's not just as simple as turning on the flash. You kind of have to know where in your menus this is located so that you can go and set your camera up appropriately. Because up until the last family photo shoot, I had no idea you could turn your flash off on your camera. So it's kind of an interesting scenario. So now we'll get into flash settings. So this is actually the back side of a Godox flash. And it's the display. So this is actually showing you set up that it's in manual. The A means that it is going to go through and follow the zoom or the fixed focal length of my lens. So if I had this on my camera with a zoom lens, that number would, you'd actually hear the head zooming in or zooming out based upon what I did with my lens. So they normally go up to about 100 millimeters, but flashes will vary, and so they have it set up. Again, this flash does do high-speed sync, and it's something that you can turn on or off. I highly recommend you turn the beep off on your batteries. It gives you the battery level. And then next to the flash head that's showing whether it's kind of a visual display of what the fixed focal length is. So if you're shooting in or out, those lines will come closer to each other. If you flip it up, you'll get a little plus sign. And then there's the power level for the flash that it's set at. It's also, some flashes may show the power levels in thirds of a stop. This flash happens to go through and show it in tenths of a stop. And you can actually lock it. And then this will just automatically sync. And again, this is strictly just the back panel of the Godox flash. And again, we talked about batteries, recycle time. So when you're looking at the specs, and if you look in the second paragraph, it says it's 0.3 to 5 seconds. That's not new battery to old battery. That's the lowest discharge rate of flash. So the 1/256 will cycle in 0.3 of a second. The full power with full fresh batteries will take 5 seconds. And sometimes the beep can be handy because if you're firing that flash and it doesn't beep, you know that you didn't discharge it completely.
Frank, that's been a big issue for me during the family photo shoots. I've got a number of black screens because I'm just shooting too fast.
Yes. I mean, even the strobes are not instantaneous.
Frank, if you have oh, you're going to get into it. No.
Was this your question?
Yeah, I
Okay.
was not exactly. The rechargeable batteries are preferable to the non-rechargeable batteries if you're like me and you have just the AAA batteries, because they and I forget the exact reasons. I'm sure you know them, but having gone through some of the old alkaline batteries very quickly, they tend to heat up a lot. After switching to the rechargeable AAAs, I've been very happy with that.
Yeah, what I was going to say, the rechargeable batteries, like the lithium batteries that are out there, they keep their power even though they're about to die. It's like if you had regular batteries that you bought Everready or Duracells, those kind of deteriorate on an angle to go through and do it. Rechargeable batteries keep their charge until they're just ready to die, and then they just fall off drastically. So I've always found that they work much better. As far as I'm concerned, they're very cost effective because I can carry around a few sets of rechargeable batteries for $45. And if I'm carrying two of the proprietary batteries, that's the cost of a flash. So I found that the batteries, I tend to use Panasonic N-loop batteries. Have used them for years and have found them to be very good. I've also used Amazon Basic and they work fairly well too. So that's kind of where, again, when we talked in the beginning about flash power, it's you can either buy a flash that uses proprietary batteries, or you can go through and have them just use AA batteries. And the higher the milliamps that you can afford, the better off. So, and John, we're going to talk about your favorite subject later when we get to it. But anyways, guide numbers. This is an interesting thing when you're going through and buying a flash, because if you're going through and looking at the guide number, I said you want the highest guide number that you can get. Well, if the flash has 60 as its guide number, if you have two flashes, each has 60, and one has using feet in the measurements and the other one is using meters, there's a big difference. Because each meter is 3 times that amount. So it's not going to be as powerful. And again, it should be rated at ISO 100, not ISO 400. Because that's going through and kind of giving you a difference in it. And if I can go through this, is a little confusing, but when you're looking at a flash, this is what you're going to go through and see. And what I was surprised with is that this flash actually listed the guide number in meters and in feet. So this has a guide number of 60 in meters and a guide number of 190 in feet. And if you know those measurements, they're basically the same. So 60 meters is about 190 feet. This said it was at 100. So with ISO 100, a guide number of 190, full power, flash head zoom to max at 24 feet. And you do the math, it comes out to f8. So again, the thing to just keep in mind is that if somebody's listing a guide number of 60 meters and 60 feet, the 60 meters is a much more powerful flash to go through and look at.
What would you recommend as a guide number for the average Joe buying a flash?
So if it's in feet, probably something that's at 120 to 150. But you're probably gonna, if you're looking at a Godox, they're gonna be higher. I mean, for 120 bucks, $130 to get the 685 flash, you can't go wrong. You know, $129 for a flash. And I don't remember who is selling them. They're on Amazon. It comes with a diffuser, the feet, and it also came with gels and a carrying case. So you don't have to be brand loyal to go through and get them to work. Because I'm sure that you can hear stories, horror stories in either direction. The one thing that I would advise you, if you're looking at buying a used flash, and I don't care who makes the flash, but if you pull out the little bounce card and it's melted, discolored, you don't want to buy it. Because that means it was probably beat to death. Because it was just picking up off the heat. So again, somewhere in the range of 120 to 150. If you're gonna buy this at 130 bucks and get 190, I think they're great flashes. Plus they're high speed.
Chance that will be affected by 145% tariff, I'm afraid. I don't.
Yeah. So buy them now. Hey, everybody's favorite thing, the inverse square law. Please do not look at the word distance in meters at the bottom. Let's look at that as a times figure. So if I have a subject, and I'm going to call him at distance 1, and I have him correctly lit, he's going to get the correct amount of light. If the background is twice the distance away, only 25% of the light will hit that background because it's twice as far. So if I went through and said, the person I'm photographing is 3 feet from me, and the background is 6 feet from me, it's only going to get 25% of the light. So whatever color it is, it's going to appear much darker than it actually is. The closer that that person is to the background, the brighter the background is going to be, which is why for most times I always recommend a gray background, because if it's farther away, it will go dark. If it's closer to the subject, it will go lighter. So if I use this same chart to say that the person is 3 feet from the camera and the background is 9 feet away, only 11% of the light is going to hit that background. And so it's going to be a very dark background. So you'll hear a lot of people talk about the inverse square law. The thing to keep in mind is that the closer that person is to the background, the lighter it's going to be. The further away they are from that background, the darker it's going to be. And having said that, we're now ready for a test. So in these two scenarios, which background is going to look brighter? And everybody should raise their hand and say B, because A is almost 3 times further away than the subject, so it will go dark. And in the example of B, it's very close to the subject, so it will appear much brighter. So just a couple more. So direct flash, right? I'm not going through and I'm just shooting square on. So one key piece of advice, if you're shooting any female, you don't want to shoot direct flash because it will bring out every texture on their skin and give them harsh lines, harsh shadows, and all the shadows will be sharp, and same with the reflections. So if you go through and take the opposite of that and use diffuse light, even if you're shooting square on with diffuse light, their skin will smooth out. There'll be smooth surface. The light will wrap around them. You'll have vague shadows. And anything that's reflecting will have a wider reflection. So just as a key to keep in mind that if you're going to shoot on camera at somebody, make sure you're diffusing the light. Unless it's a guy, then you want harsh lines and all of that. You'll hear the terms hard light and soft light. Instead of going through these definitions, hard light means that your light is much smaller than your subject, and soft light means that your light source is much larger than your subject. And again, key differences: no harsh shadows, no bright spots. Everything is very evenly lit, no hard shadows to go through and set up. Now, what everybody's been waiting for: how do you set up your camera? How do you set up your flash? So for your cameras, white balance, auto or flash, or create a custom one. I'm going to recommend auto or flash. The other thing that will impact is, and I believe it's Canon that has camera styles and Nikon has picture styles. You may want to look at using portrait or matching it up your in-camera settings for what you're shooting, like landscape, vivid, anything else. Are you gonna use aperture priority or manual? For your camera, I would go with manual so that everything looks the same all the time. And again, knowing your highest flash sync speed on your camera and make sure that you stay at or below it. Okay, flash settings. Big fan of using TTL on your flash. So that if you're using a the diffuser, your flash is going to put out enough power to go through and set it up. This does not say that you can't use manual. Most of the time, if I'm using flash, I shoot full manual. Shoot manual with the flash, manual with the camera settings. Once I lock it in, I stay with that power. You go through and set it up. Probably the one thing I see I didn't put in here, ISO, use your base ISO settings on your camera. So if your camera's base ISO is ISO 100, 200, 140, let's go through and stick with that. And again, these are just some of the flash diffusers that you can use. And with the exception of the Pentex down in the bottom, I think I own all of these. So we'll get into kind of a flash checklist to go through and shoot. Step one, breathe. Because if you're going to rush through this or you're excited, you're going to set something wrong. Again, have new or newly charged batteries. I always recommend that you turn your flash off before you mount it on your camera. Because sometimes strictly by putting your flash on your camera when your flash is turned on, you will fire your flash. So I'm a big fan of turning your flash off before you mount it on your camera. Again, set your flash mode, TTL or manual. TTL on your flash is a great way to go. And again, if you want to go through and shoot in manual, make sure that you've got it set for your correct power. You don't need to blast every shot out of the flash at full power. Go through and adjust it. Again, ISO. Stick with your base. You want to use less power? Fine. Kick up your ISO to 400, 6.8. Just don't put it in auto. Because if you're trying, your camera's going to try and meet off a dark room, it's going to kick that ISO way up. So ISO, setting your ISO to auto is not a good thing. If you're setting it up on your camera, manual or aperture preferred. Again, a big proponent of shooting in manual on the camera, TTL or manual on a flash. And then just check your flash mode, because you may have gone through and saw this and decided to try, rear sync or slow. And then you go to use your flash and you can't figure out why it's not working correctly. Or maybe you found out that, you can turn it off and forgot to turn it back on. Exposure compensation, you can do in a couple places. I would probably just recommend that you leave it alone. White balance setting for auto or flash. Again, camera, make sure you set your aperture and your shutter speeds in manual. Take your test shot, adjust as needed, and start the process all over again. Few do's and don'ts, right? Use flash to fill shadows. Great thing to do. Bounce the flash. Learn how to bounce it. The other thing to keep in mind is that if you're close to a wall, you might be able to bounce your flash in the wall behind you. making the light, the whole wall behind you, the light that's doing everything. Don't be afraid to adjust your flash power and or even use flash outdoors. And make sure that you're going through and experimenting with off-camera flash. Some don'ts. Don't use direct flash in close quarters. Red eye's kind of a thing of the past, but this will bring them back real quick. Again, rely on flash at night. You're not going to go through, even with a very powerful flash, you're not going to give enough power to be the sun and relight everything. If you have the chance to use a diffuser, use it. And the other thing is watch your sync speed. Know where it's at. And then again, as Sue brought up, make sure that you're giving your flash enough time to recharge before you go through and do anything. And above all, keep calm and read the manual. That's my last slide.
A classic Frank finish.
Thank you. So are there any questions before I make my next offer?
Yes, Frank. Back when you're talking about the inverse square law and the fact that the subject closer to the background will appear lighter, I understand that. But so that's in relation to the flash that you are using. But if there's other light in the room, those same principles apply, but they're going to apply to whatever that source is and the location of it.
Well, let's back up one quick sec. So if my first shot was a total black shot, the ambient light means nothing. Okay.
Okay.
If I went through and I took the picture and I don't know if I don't think you photographed the family photo shoot.
I have not.
One of the things we do is we turn off all the lights and we use modeling light. So basically there is no ambient light. We could just by the same thing, turn the lights on in the room. Okay. And we're shooting at 250th of a second. So the impact would be whatever that first picture would be, that would be the brightest picture that you would end up with. If that made sense.
Yeah.
So not sure if that answered the question, but the inverse square law is taking into account strictly the power from the flash, the light from the flash.
Okay.
That black picture you showed at the beginning, you just showed that for demonstration purposes. You don't really take a picture of the room that's black before you start a shoot, do you?
Do I? Yes, I do.
I thought so.
Do you? No. So yes, when I go through and set the lights up in the room, I do take this picture to make sure that I'm not getting any other lights.
I just wouldn't enter in a competition. I don't think it's
Oh,
gonna.
you wouldn't? Okay. So don't use this one, John?
No, even though it's all your own work, I think it's,
Yeah,
Frank, you can enter that one. I'm judging.
thank you. I appreciate it. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm looking to do part 2 for this as a bring your own flash and do a hands-on at the library. So question number 1, any interest in doing that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I will set this up that we'll probably do it because our first speaker next year is late September.
I think it's the
So
30th.
So we'll probably do this some Saturday at the library in September. Hopefully before the the first meeting. And we'll have it set up so that you can create these. And then we'll set up the strobes that we use for the family photo shoot. And you can play with that. So even if you don't own a flash, I'm sure that I might be able to find a flash to use. If nothing else, you can use the strobes because the controllers for the strobes are generic, which is why everybody can use them. So more to follow on that. Any other questions?
One other question. So, in a lot of your discussion here about, the power of what flash to look for, and they're rated at certain ISOs, and it relates to the GN numbers. So if the cameras that we have, the OM systems, the native ISO is 200, but then you'll have a Kodak full frame with a native of 100. I mean, how does that factor into various discussions? Because people always say, well, your ISO isn't as good as my ISO, and
There's no ISO as like an Olympus ISO. If you're talking in regards to the guide number, the power,
yeah.
right? So that only has to do with how the flash itself is rated. So having said that, I'll take your Kodak shooter
Mm.
and the Olympus shooter,
Mm.
and
Mm.
one of you may be shooting at 1/32 power, and the other one might be shooting at 1/16 power. Because the ISO controls overall, but in reality, when we do the family photo shoot and we have people shooting with Nikon, Olympus,
Even
we have
Canon.
Canon shooters, right? And everybody has a different native ISO,
Right.
right? So the first thing that I do, and John can keep me honest, is I will tell him about what aperture to shoot at. Because I've measured the lights and the lights told me using my meter that it should be at 5.6 or 6.3 at ISO 200, right? So that's the base point, the starting point. Sometimes they come in and again, the strobes don't shoot in like 1/8 power, 1/64 power. They shoot a number between 1 and 10, and they shoot in tenths of an increment. So for that person, maybe the lights are set up at 6.5 and we need to go to 7.1 or that. Again, there is no hard rule that says, you want to take a flash picture? This is it. ISO 200, 2/50th of a second, 5.6, and you're good to go. The answer to that is no, because the light's going to be different. Your subject distance is going to be different. It's different. When we're shooting
Okay.
in that room, I'm going to call it as close to a controlled environment that we can get. But you might have a family that comes in wearing all black. You might have a family that
Look
comes
out
in
for that
wearing
family.
wearing bright red. Or what did oh God, Kristen Long shot one family and they came in dressed up like stick figures.
Oh, yeah.
They were wearing all white. They had paper plate faces, and so it's like it's going to vary.
I get it.
So,
And let me rest the concerns of anyone who hasn't participated in the family photo shoot about all this, because you don't have to know any of this. Frank will tell you what to put in your camera, and it always works. And you don't have to figure out, there's no math involved. And occasionally there's treats. So
yeah, you gotta get
I have,
early for the treats, but yeah, there are treats involved.
I have to say, I
Thank you,
second
thank you.
that.
I understand that now, Frank. Appreciate it.
So,
Uh,
and I'll ask Sue, first time she did it. The
oh,
most difficult
clearly,
thing of the family photo shoot is getting the edits done.
exactly. Everything
Shooting
Frank has,
is pure fun,
it
right?
is. It really is. Frank has everything set up so nicely that you can just step in and take the pictures, and it is a tremendous amount of fun. So I highly recommend it.
I mean, the biggest issue is when you get done shooting 8 families and you realize in 20 minutes you were able to take 50 pictures and you wonder how you did that. And you've got 400 pictures to go through and edit,
Exactly.
right? But the thing is, because again, we're in a controlled environment, the
Mhm.
aperture didn't change, the
Mhm.
shutter speed didn't change, the ISO didn't change, the lighting didn't change, right? Your edits don't become that complicated. The biggest
Abs-
problem with edits you'll have, glare on glasses. Well, is that correct? Or,
You're
and
absolutely
shiny
correct.
skin too. Yeah.
yeah, shiny skin and glare on glasses. So
That,
I was gonna say,
go ahead.
it's not, we use very soft lighting. When we're doing the family photo, we use 42-inch diffusers. So that light coming out of there is very soft. So, any other questions?
It's been great, Frank.
So if you want a
Frank,
copy
thank
of
you so
this presentation, let me know. I'll forward it on, or an edited version of it.
I have to tell you, I'm just so